are continuing our virtual pilgrimage in Israel. Yesterday we were way up in the Golan Heights at Caesarea Philippi. Today we're going to start making our way towards Jerusalem, which is further south, of course. But before we get there, we're going to stop again by the Sea of Galilee. We're going to stop at the Church of the Beatitudes, which is a church up on a hilltop looking out over the Sea of Galilee, one of the traditional sites where perhaps Jesus preached his Sermon on the Mount. Now, Matthew tells us that he was on a mountain. Luke tells us he was on a plain, and in Luke, the same sermon is the Sermon on the Plain. Obviously, all of the teaching that we get from either the Sermon on the Mount or the Sermon on the Plain were part and parcel of what Jesus taught many, many times and in many, many ways. But we go to the Church of the Beatitudes up there, looking out over the Sea of Galilee. There's a little kind of natural amphitheater there, and you can imagine lots of people sitting in that natural little cleft in the hillside, and Jesus standing with his back to the Sea of Galilee, speaking up to the people there on the hill, and them being able to hear him because of the way that the hillside was shaped. The Sermon on the Mount is the very core of Jesus' ethical teaching. It's the Sermon on the Mount where indeed we get the Beatitudes, and we'll talk about those in a minute, but we also get his difficult teachings about turning the other cheek, not resisting, teachings about not uttering curses or oaths, but simply letting our yes be yes or our no be no, teachings about simply avoiding adultery not being enough, but that we also must beware of the danger of lust in our lives. Teachings where he tells us that it's not enough to say, I've never killed anyone. If you've been angry enough to want someone dead, to wish someone dead, then that anger is just as bad as murdering them as well. And so difficult teachings, challenging teachings. And they begin with the Beatitudes at the very beginning of Matthew 5. Up in the Church of the Beatitudes are all listed in beautiful windows up above in the upper story of the church, and it's a very peaceful place and a neat place. But in fact, the Beatitudes set the stage for the Sermon on the Mount. Because if we are to be followers of Jesus, our lives are going to look upside down, and people are not going to understand. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. Blessed are those who are poor or poor in spirit. What in the world is Jesus talking about? And it even almost gets worse if it could. Blessed are the peacemakers. One of the hardest things to do, and following on the heels of blessed are the peacemakers, is this warning almost. Blessed are you when you are persecuted for my name's sake. If you dare try to be a peacemaker, if you try to follow Jesus, you're likely to be persecuted. And yet let's look at those Beatitudes. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And this is not a time heals all wounds kind of thing. I really see this as Jesus promising us that when we mourn, he is with us, just as he wept at Lazarus' tomb with Mary, and he offered Martha those wonderful words, I am the resurrection and the life. He comes to us when we mourn and comforts us. And so often when he comes to us when we mourn, he comes to us through other people. If you think back to a time when you were grieving, I bet there are people you can name. People who maybe didn't say a word, but just offered a hug, sent a plant or a meal, were there at the funeral, weeks after perhaps the funeral, were there for you in one way or another. Blessed are those who mourn, because the brothers and sisters of Jesus Christ are going to be there to comfort them. We're in a country right now that's mourning, in a world that's mourning. 113,000 or more United States citizens have died of the coronavirus. A lot of people mourning, and there's a lot of tragic stories about that. Of course, George Floyd being murdered a couple of weeks ago, his family mourning, but also the families of all of those connected, even those police officers who've been arrested, mourning that their lives are completely changed by what happened. How are the children of God, the brothers and sisters of Jesus Christ, going to comfort those who are mourning, whether they might be close to us or far away? And then, as I mentioned, blessed are the peacemakers. We're living in a time of really, and I know a lot of people are tired of this word unprecedented, but unprecedented divisions in our society, in our world. Even the coronavirus has become political and has divided people. Wearing a mask or not wearing a mask is sometimes a political statement. How can we make peace in this world that is being ripped apart by a virus, by racism, by the ways that we're trying to decide how are we supposed to respond? Each of us will have to look to Christ, look to perhaps experience some of that hunger and thirst for righteousness. Christ, I want to do the right thing. And if we do so, we are promised, those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they shall be filled. Those who mourn shall be comforted. Those who know they are poor in spirit. My mind, my spirit just isn't where it needs to be at this time. God is with them. And then blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons and the daughters of God. Let us commit ourselves this day and every day to recognizing that indeed we are poor in spirit, that we should be and hopefully are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, but that also means that we want to be peacemakers. And so however we can be peacemakers this day, let us do that so that we might be sons and daughters of our living God.